Hi, everyone. My name is Jade Reiner, and I'm so excited to welcome all of you to the Illustrating for Beginners panel. Thank you so much for joining us for our first ever virtual ITHACON. We're so honored to have Steve Ellis here with us today. Steve, thank you for taking the time to share your talents with us. At any point, if anyone has any questions, you could just type them in the chat box or unmute, whatever is easiest, or direct message me or Sabrina Katz, who's in here also. Let me toss it over to Steve. Steve, if you want to start off with introducing yourself and then get going.
Sure. Yeah. So my name is Steve Ellis. I'm a comic book artist and game artist. I've worked for Marvel Comics on Iron Man and Captain America and a couple other characters over there who I'm blanking on, Thor. I've worked at DC Comics on Hawkman and Lobo and Green Lantern. And I've also done a bunch of independent projects, like I make a deck of cards in a book called Thornclaw Manor, which is like a book of monsters and their stories. And I've kind of become known as a guy who draws monsters a lot because of the fantasy stuff. So The Only Living Boy was a graphic novel series that we completed. It's now in one big book, and it has tons and tons of monsters in it, and it's like 400 pages and insane. And I'm currently working on this series called The Only Living Girl, which is kind of a secondary series to The Only Living Boy, or a sister series, I guess. And so I spent a lot of time drawing. I spent a lot of time drawing, aliens and monsters and other adventure-y type things. And so today we're going to draw. Someone requested that we draw a creature from The Only Living Boy, which is this dragon right here, Balakar the dragon. So I figured it'd be fun to kind of do a dragon because, dragons are fun and they're scary and they're big, and this guy's particularly scary. And so I'll start showing you how the materials I use, and then we'll start drawing, okay? So let me flip the camera around to the other side. And so here we are. So the materials I'm using today are, I'm getting people to admit.
Sabrina will admit the people.
Okay, cool. So let me flip the camera. I thought I did that. It didn't work. There we go. So materials I'm using today are, I use a red pencil. You don't need to use a red pencil, but I use a red pencil just because I like having two different types of pencils. But in the event you don't have a red pencil, just draw really, really light when you first start. And then I have my Ticonderoga black it's an HB. I think it's a number 2 pencil. Like, you don't need to have, incredible tools to do this. I have my pencil sharpener. I also have an electric pencil sharpener, which I'll probably end up using because this gets messy. And I have my eraser, and this eraser looks a little beaten up because my daughter got involved with playing with it and started shredding it. And I have a ruler, which I'm probably not going to use, but I always have a ruler just nearby. So the first things we do first thing I like to talk about when we do a drawing class, when we do Monster Art School. I do a thing called Monster Art School where I show kids and other people how to draw, usually monsters and other creatures. So it's kind of become my thing. And so the first thing I normally talk about almost every single episode is when we start drawing, we want to start with basic shapes. So what I always want to do is I always reserve an extra sheet of paper to just kind of show some basic shapes that we want to draw. And I'm getting a weird, can you guys see that? I hope, because I'm wondering if I'm getting a weird light situation. Let me turn on the overhead light because I feel like it's a little dark.
Okay,
maybe that'll help a little bit. Sorry?
It looks great. We can see it.
Okay, cool. So anyway, so the first thing is, what I like to do is with my pencils is I like to scrape back a little of the lead so that I can see more lead, so I can draw with a little bit more of the side of my pencil. And you can do that with a knife too, but it allows me to get lines like this as opposed to sharp pointy lines like when you write. And it's sometimes good to do sharp pointy lines, but sometimes you want to have softer lines, and they're also much easier to erase. Like, see, so you want to make sure you're able to erase, especially the early stages of your drawing. So what we're going to talk about first is the basic shapes that we're going to use today. So basic shape well, obviously this looks like a circle, and I'm going over it many, many times, right? And the reason I'm doing that is because if I try to do it once, it might not be a circle. So I do it a number of times until I get, one time I get a weird like oblong shape or whatever. But if I keep massaging it in a way and keep drawing it, I'll get the circle I want. And then instead of just being a circle, what's nice is to think about this circle as a sphere. So I always want to draw around the sphere and around the sphere, almost like I'm drawing from behind and around the object. And that becomes very important. So I draw these lines as if they're coming from behind and around to the front. And it's very important because that's what gives us the sense that this is a three-dimensional object, not just a two-dimensional object. So the difference between this and just a circle like that. So this starts to feel three-dimensional. Another thing that can make it feel three-dimensional is just kind of giving a little bit heavier line on one side. On the side where the light is, where the light is not. So if we imagine the light is up here, a little heavier line on this side kind of gives us a sense of volume. And that's good for doing drawings, especially when you want to draw something that looks three-dimensional. So since that's probably the one major shape, and then the other major shape we're going to do is we're going to work on a figure 8, which I know sounds kind of weird. How am I doing a dragon with a figure 8? And I want you to also think about scalloped lines like this, okay? So in other words, a line that goes in and around and then back out like that. You can almost even see how that's kind of very dragon-y shape, right? So we're going to work with those kinds of shapes. So let's get started on our dragon. So the way I always like to start a drawing is I try to think of a shape that kind of says the whole drawing for me. And in this case, remember I talked about the figure 8? I want to think about the figure 8. And the reason I want to think about the figure 8 is the figure 8, well, we'll just draw it and you'll see. I'm going to draw kind of a weird figure 8 where the top of the figure 8 is going to be smaller. And then the bottom of the figure 8 is going to be big. So it's not so much a figure 8 as two kind of blobs that are interconnected. Can you see that? And can you draw along with me? Great. All right. Just want to make sure that it's seeable. So now we've got that. That's like the basic underdrawing of the piece. Okay. We're going to know this is going to be what our character is going to be based on. And so another line we're going to do here is we're going to have a line that comes through and comes like so. So this one line's going to come around, and notice I'm making kind of an oval here or an eye shape right there. I want that as well. So we're just going to draw around. We're going to make this shape. Now, what's going to happen is you're going to see, like, we're going to make these basic shapes, and eventually you're going to see that the character's going to come out. And so I'm drawing really lightly. So remember, you want to be able to draw light enough that you can easily erase it. You don't want these are not permanent lines. So just remember, easily erase these. So just keep it very light and soft. So now up here on the top here, I'm going to draw a sphere like we did on the other page, just a circle, sphere, whatever you want to call it. And then we're going to draw another, we're going to pretend that this is the sphere is the head and this is the neck. And we're going to pretend that the body is down here because dragons have long, swoopy necks. So we're going to have this long, swoopy kind of snake-like neck. And then this right here is where his rib cage is and his chest is. So we're going to make another circle for that. And then we're going to make a third circle down here. And that third circle is for the hips and the legs, where the legs come out. So if you think about how like a dog works or even a person works, we have kind of a solid object for our chest and a big solid object for our hips and a solid object for our head. Now, we're not going to just stick with a circle for the head, but we'll get to the next step on that in a little bit. So what the next part of the drawing is going to be is I want to make sure that we take into account the wings. So from right about here where our chest is, we're going to draw up with that arcing shape. Remember we were talking about the scallop shape? I'm going to go in, and then we're going to go down like that. And that's one wing. And then we're going to go up here and down like that. And because this wing is behind, you know, he's got two wings, one's in the front, one's in the back. We're only going to see this kind of triangle shape of the wing, like a curved triangle. So now we've got the head, the neck, the chest, the hips. Now, what's this big swirl about here? Well, this is going to be where the tail comes out. So we're going to have the tail curling around like that. And we can even play a little fun. That's the bottom of that original figure 8. And we can have a little fun with it, like maybe have it curve out like this to give it a little bit more flair. So maybe he has like a, you know, a curved tail that comes out like this. And you can give that more volume. If you think about it like a giant ribbon, a big fat ribbon, it's going to turn away from us and flip around and then come down and around like this. And it's going to follow basically the sense of the spine of the creature. So if you imagine that this dragon has a spine, like a person or a dog has a spine, the spine is going to be in here. And a dog, on a dog's tail, their tail comes out of their spine. So the spine comes like this, and then the tail is going to come out like this. So we kind of have this idea that the spine, which also will go up the neck, is kind of the center of the body. It's the thing that everything kind of hangs off of on the body. So actually, I'm going to curve that spine in a little bit more. So you'll see in a little bit how that works. So we have the spine down over the hips to the tail. Now the head, I think I'm about to get interrupted by my dogs. Give me one sec. Get out, puppy. Get out. Go ahead. Go. Sorry. Left the door open. So with what we're going to do next is we're going to look at our legs and our head. So the head is here, and we want that head to have that long kind of dragon snout kind of a thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring from the center of that head, we're going to imagine that the head is a circle. And we're going to remember those lines we did before where we drew around it. We're going to draw around it to make a nice sphere. And then we're going to choose this line here, and we're going to extend it out. And we're going to make a cone. So a cone is another one of those basic shapes that we should have talked about. But basically a cone, I mean, actually a cylinder is probably the best word here. We're going to make an oval, and then we're going to draw out and make another oval here. And we're going to draw out from the corners. So you're kind of making like a cup, a ball sitting in a cup, right? See that? And that's going to be his snout eventually. Now we bring the neck back, and we're going to get to the arms and legs. So the arms, we're going to put a shoulder here and a shoulder here. But since we're only going to see the side of the shoulder, it's all the way on the other side of the chest. So we want to make sure that we know that one is here and one is there. And then we're going to bring from the shoulder, we'll go down to an elbow. And we'll make another elbow. And dragons, in this case, I think my dragon's going to have kind of a, in the front, they're going to have reverse arms. So what I mean by that is that their arms go, well, actually, no, these are regular arms, but the hands are going to go different. Where you got your elbow, and then it's going to come out to another sphere here, where we're going to have our wrists. And then down here, we're going to have the hands. And basically, I just make little triangles for the hands and tubes for the wrist, for the arms, and circles for the wrist and the elbows, just so that I get a nice sense of volume there. And now we're going to get to the leg. Now, I think he's sitting, so the leg here is actually connected back here to the spine. So we're going to go up to the knee because he's crouching, and then back to his ankle. And then his foot is going to come up like so. And maybe we'll throw 3 divisions on that foot to make toes. We're keeping it pretty loose right now. So now we've got the wings here. We're going to make those wings a little bit bigger. And we've got the tail here. I'm kind of thinking it right now that these hands, I might redo one of these hands to make them a little bit more threatening, maybe, or at least just less like he's sitting down like a dog. I'm drawing him like kind of a greyhound right now. So I'll just move this hand back, and I'm going to move the wrist up like this. And I'm just going to make these kind of angled shapes for the fingers. And we'll have the other hand back here behind. Now that we have the chest and we have this back leg, we can put the belly in. And I always like to think the dragons are kind of thin in the belly. So give them a nice thin belly. It's really just that line between the original sphere of the chest and the sphere of the hips. And then we should probably back here throw a shape that follows this shape for the back foot. And we're never really going to see that. So I'm just going to shade that in. So we're never really going to deal with that being an actual part of the object, but just to have it there and acknowledge that we're there with a little silhouette. That's a nice thing to do. So now let's get to the head of this guy. So this dragon is a talking dragon. So he's a pretty smart dragon. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that we know that he's intelligent. So he's going to have eyes that look like they're smart. So right about here where the snout meets the ball of the head, we're going to draw a line out here that comes out as a curve. And then when we get to about halfway up the head here, I'm going to bring this down and I'm going to make cheeks. And under this line, I'm going to go like that and make a half moon, another half moon there, and then a straight line and another little half moon there. So this is his eye socket and his eyes. So he should look something like that. And then we're going to follow this cone line from the cheek down. And we're going to do the same on this side. We're going to follow it from that center there down like this. And then we're going to draw his nostrils. So for his nostrils, I'm going to make a line that curves out through the center here and comes in like this. So almost like a flower petal or a leaf kind of a shape. And then we're going to draw two lines like this that go down and make his nostril. Now his mouth, the top of his mouth, we're just going to kind of put in there. And then underneath here, we're going to make another shape that kind of mimics this shape here, like an S curve with a half moon under here. And that's going to be his chin. And we can throw little triangles off here, little curved triangles to kind of make it look like he's kind of got a hairy chin. Now, Balakar has mustaches, so we'll just throw a curve in here because he's kind of related to an Eastern dragon. And we'll throw a curve in there for his mustache. And then, now right now, this looks like it's his whole eye, but you'll see in a sec, that's just going to be his eye socket because his eye is this thing here. So what we're going to do in there is we're going to throw a little half moon pupil in there, another little half moon pupil in there. We're going to draw another line under the eye that kind of follows the shape of the eye and then comes out. And that'll be the lower eyelid. You can see it on this side too. And then we're going to take this line and bring it up to here. And we'll put a little mark like so to show that his cheek is being pulled back into a smile. And when you have the cheek back here being pulled back into a smile, you need to have the cheek up here grinning. So we make like a C shape here to show the underside of the cheekbone. We'll do the same on this side. So if the cheekbone's here, we'll draw a shape like that to kind of just make it be the same on both sides. Now we're going to get into the dog muzzle kind of look. So dogs and in this case dragons have wrinkles when they're angry on their nose. And I like to imagine that Balakar is pretty much always angry. So I'm going to mimic this shape that I created for the nose. And I'm just going to kind of draw those shapes rippling down the nose so that we have that kind of fun, scaly look. And then down here, I'm going to make the mouth curve come to a point. And then we can start to throw in teeth. And the teeth are really just triangles. So I throw one like that, maybe one coming down like that on either side of the mouth line. And you can curve the line as you go to show that the teeth are coming out from underneath the lips. Pardon me. Now that we've got that done, we need to kind of re-erase. And this is why I said to draw everything lightly before. Once you start getting to these finish lines, you can get a little bit more intense with your drawing lines. Once you decide that I definitely want this line there, you can say, okay, I'm going to draw it really dark. But when you're first starting out, you want to keep everything light. So I'm keeping all this light because I want to give him his chin, and I'm going to give him a lip, a lower lip. So it's going to come out like so and come out like so. And then his chin is going to have these kind of hairs on the bottom. And you can even like draw a couple extra lines in there off these triangles to soften them up to make them feel a little bit more like hair or hanging scales or something like that. So now we've got his eyes and his nose and his mouth. Now we need to have his eyebrows and his ears, right? Because, he's got to be able to hear you. So his eyebrows, what I would do is just draw from here up like this. And you kind of draw a half moon over the eye and then curve up. So you get that half moon shape. And then you curve up from there. And then from the cheekbone, we're going to make a curve that kind of mimics that cheekbone line, but goes out that way. And we'll do the same on this side. That's going to be the beginning of his ears. So now we're going to bring that back to his head. And then we'll come back out here and bring that back to his head. And then we'll get his big, gnarly horns that come up like this. And I give them a nice curve, like an S curve. And they're going to come out of this section of the eye like this. So on this side, do the same thing, the big S curve. And then we'll make that other second one here and the third one there. Now, it looks like he has giant spines sticking out of his head. And that's okay, but we'll put another one there. What I like about Balakar and about dragons is you can kind of add little angles and stuff and make them look a little bit more fearsome by making the, by just putting more scales or more details to it. So now with these, I want to connect this because I'm imagining there's like bat-like skin between his ear things. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect it like this and then up to his horn. So we have this kind of bat skin stretched between these horns. You can even draw like what I'm doing right now is I'm kind of drawing little ridges to show the stretched skin on there. And then little triangles we'll put on top of that half moon over the eye. And those little triangles, I put 3, little triangles end up being horns that, like little tiny horns that are on his eyes. And we can even put his eyelid in here, upper eyelid like that. And remember, you can erase the extra lines that kind of get in the way. So the idea is that we're drawing all these little shapes and then we connect them by erasing what's the basis for those shapes. So once we have the line we want, we erase what we don't want. So anything that you don't want, you just kind of redraw, what you do want, and you erase what you don't want. So up here, I'm just going to throw some ridges to make it a little more textural. And then I'm going to put, remember the top of that original sphere? I'll put a line there for the back of his head. Now, Balakar has scales, so I'll put that line there, but then I'm going to break it up with the scales, like so, just to make it look more threatening and more scary, because, dragon. So now we've got the neckline here, and we've got the neckline here, which we'll let this come down as like a curve, like a backward C or a soft curve there. And we'll do the same. We'll mimic that over here for his neck. And it'll curve around and come down like so. Now we have to get onto the rest of his body. Now, one thing I noticed now is that as I was drawing his head, I kind of made his head a little bit big. So we're just going to play around with that and let that be. I might make his leg a little bit bigger, his lower leg a little bit bigger to balance that out. But, I think it's kind of neat. So right here where the two shoulders meet, or where the two shoulders are, we're going to draw a triangle going down like this. And on a human being, that would be the clavicle. That's the bone that goes between your two shoulders. But on this guy, it's just going to be an indication of how we're going to do the scales on his chest. And it also acts as a clavicle. It centers the torso for us, so we know where the middle of the torso is. And so if we know where the middle of the torso is, we should know where the middle of the neck is. So I can draw that, and this line is the middle of the neck. And then I'm going to draw another line that comes like that. That's not the middle of the neck, but it's like on the side of the neck. And that way we can do scales on the inside of his neck. So we'll just draw these scales coming down. And they're all going to mimic that clavicle triangle, except I'm making them a little curved. It's not really a triangle. It's like a fake triangle because it's only two sides. And then again, we just erase what we don't want. So we get rid of the center line. And then we have our character. And now, or we have that part of the neck. And now we can imagine that here we've got smaller scales. So I'm going to draw little triangles going like so. They're not even triangles really, they're arrows like that, coming up and away from those bigger triangles. So I imagine that his underbelly has nice big armored triangles, and then his back has smaller armor triangles like so. And you don't need to draw every single scale. In fact, I like to leave it up to the imagination of the viewer to fill in those scales. So as you go, you just kind of make more scales. And then if we're going to continue that down, we find the center of his chest here, and we want to have his little arm come in and join his chest on both sides. And I'm going to make that kind of angular. Even though we started with a sphere, I'm going to have it be angular just because I want it to be more interesting than a soft sphere. So then I'm going to pull from his back where the wings touch, and I'm going to draw a line that comes down and around like so. And this is just a nod to the idea that this dragon's wings have to have some sort of muscle that attaches them to his arm, to his body. So I'm going to do that there. And then I'm going to draw the shoulder of the dragon right here. And I don't have to draw the whole thing. I just need to draw kind of a line that indicates where it might be. And then we'll come down to the elbow. And I'm going to make the elbow kind of a triangle We're going to have the bicep on the front of the arm, and then we'll come down and follow that tube down. And see, I'm softening these lines and making them curve out. That's just to give the idea that there's more volume and substance to it. If I just did straight tubes like that, it would feel kind of mechanical, and I want this to feel living. So I use curvy lines for living things. So now we've got the underside of his chest. We'll go like so, and then we'll draw the back arm here. And that we're also going to shade in. And now I'm going to be a little bit more forceful about my shading because I want to be like certain, okay, that's going dark. So I don't need to see this leg. So we just need to see a silhouette of it. So let's let it go to back in the back. And then we're going to go and we're going to draw the foot. So I'm going to put a egg shape here. And that's the side of his hand here. And then I'm going to draw up to the knuckle and then down to the talon. And I'll do the same here, up to the knuckle and then down to the talon there and up to the knuckle and down to the talon. And I do a fair amount of overlapping. So what I want to do is I want to do one of these so everyone knows what I'm drawing. And then I can just kind of do overlaps that mimic that same shape, or not overlaps, but things behind it that mimic that same shape, but still not drawing the whole shape so that this one is in the front. And now I can finish these lines up and make them a little bit more finished looking and more powerful. And then I can go and kind of do the same thing back here where I'm just going to draw a shadow. I don't even really have to pay attention to how perfectly it mimics the other foot. It's just there to kind of let the viewer know that the other foot is there, just like this one here is. So we don't need to worry so much about the one in the shadow because we're not looking at that one. Now, from here, we're going to go down his back and then over his hip. And remember I said I was going to make his hip a little bit bigger. So I'm going to bring this back to here. And then we're going to bring this up to his knee. And remember we had a knee, we do those circles for the knees and the elbows. So we'll do a circle or a box for it, get a nice sharp angle, and then we'll bring it back to the ankle here, and we'll bring it forward. And just like we did with the feet here, we can bring this forward and do another egg shape for the ball of his foot, and then up and down for one claw, up and down for the second claw, and up and down for the third claw. And I'm making the third one smaller because what I want is the idea that the center one is the biggest one of all. So if the third one over here is smaller than this middle one, it gives the impression that this middle one is bigger than the others. And notice I'm drawing under and around these things here. That's just to make it feel more like a toe. So instead of just drawing a straight line, I draw it in like this. And the idea is to create the impression that there's stuff going on under the surface of the skin. So now we have his leg in place, and we can draw the flat part of his knee. So I'm just going to do this, and I'm going to draw in. And that's supposed to just indicate that the knee is three-dimensional and almost like you've got a box here. And that's the bottom of the box. So now let's fill this dark in. For that back leg. Now, I'm going to erase some of these extra lines. I'll get my big eraser out because that'll make it a little easier to see. So I'll erase a lot of these extra lines. I kind of like the extra lines because they give me an idea of where my drawing kind of started as a story. Like, oh, I started with these loose lines and now I'm here at these finished lines. So I kind of like the idea of allowing things to be kind of the history of my drawing in my drawing. But I'm going to erase a lot of it now. just so that there's only a smudge of those in there, because I want the main dark lines that I'm drawing now to be the ones that everyone sees. So now I'm going to finish up a little more detailing on his chest. And basically the idea is I want the impression that this arm section is in front of this chest section. So in order to do that, I kind of set up an overlapping shape with these corner pieces in here. And so as we move back, everything's going to overlap. So this overlaps this, which overlaps this, which overlaps this. And that's how you create depth in your drawing. So I'll let this go to dark here. And I'll overlap this so we get that sense that the arm overlaps. And then back here on the back of the arm, I imagine the dragon has like fighting scales back here. So we'll throw some almost little daggers on the back of his arm and bring them onto his arm here for scales. And then maybe he has some stripes that come like this. I'm gonna make them triangle stripes that come over his arm. And notice I'm not using straight lines. I'm letting them all curve as if they're on a solid round object. And we can shade those in. He's got kind of tiger stripes on his shoulder. And then back here, we want to do the same on his neck. Going all the way up. And we can shade those in. So now you see the combination of this pattern, this little triangle pattern, and these bigger triangle shapes of the dark shapes, kind of make it feel like a snake with spots. And that's kind of the effect I want to create. So up here, it's going to look more like stripes. We'll bring those up. And on his face here, we can put a few more lines to indicate scales. And I think his eyes, he almost looks too kind. So I'm going to make sure his eyes are dark. I'll make it very dark under here. I need to sharpen my pencil. Give me 1 sec. This is going to be loud. Now I'm going to pull some of that wed away. And now I can use my pencil a little bit more like I'm a writing implement, because I want those more detailed lines in there. So rather than drawing with the side of my pencil, I can draw with the point of my pencil because I want to get that sharpness in there. So anyway, let's get back to this part of the dragon here. So the leg comes in. We're going to do that same overlap thing we did with the front leg, where it overlaps in front of the hip of the body. And then we have the wing. And I think the wing is going to block a lot of the back. So while we might see part of the back here, we're probably going to have the wing come out like this. So let's draw like kind of a curved triangle shape like that coming out of the back. And then we'll make a second one. Comes up to here. And you can think of this as like a curved tube or a very, very long extended triangle. Comes to a point up there. And then we're going to have this arc like so, like another curved triangle there. And that's kind of the thumb of the dragon on the back there. And then from here, we'll follow this curve down. Now see, here's where we get into an issue, right? I kind of want the dragon's wing to come in front of his hip. So I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to let it come down. And here's where the scallop shapes we were talking about before come into play. Come up and down, up, around and down. Like so. And these are to mimic the idea that this is folded up material. So you can draw these lines in here like folds in cloth. I kind of bring the idea of the wing is all folded up here. And if you want to get a little bit crazy about it, you can allow these to have a curve to them. And then it makes them feel even more folded. And then on the other side, we'll just do a silhouette that kind of mimics this wing. And we can just shade that in as well. So we don't really need to see it. And if it's in shadow, we get the silhouette, and that's good enough to tell us what's going on there, as you can see. And for consistency's sake, we can put some other triangles back here and silhouette those as the wing in the background. Now we've got the hip here, which we've drawn like 4 times now. And then we got the tail. And the tail, remember the beginning, that figure 8 we started with, this is that bottom of that tail. So we're going to bring this down. And we're going to leave the foot there, the ankle. But we're going to pretend that the tail comes from here. We're going to skip the ankle, and we're going to follow the curve around like so. And then back around like that. And then this one, we're going to follow the same line. We're just going to get closer and closer to the original line as we go until we get to a point where the two meet. You can see it's kind of a giant S curve, but you want them to eventually meet at a tip. Now, let's get that. We're going to draw the rock that he's sitting on. And really all that is, we draw a line here and a line there, and we give some depth under his feet and toes by thickening the lines to make them feel like they're touching something. And I'll do the same here. And what that does is it gives us room to put the tail coming from back here and going behind this ankle here. Now, I don't know about you, but I think dragons should have kind of, what do you call them, scales on their back that stick up. So I'm going to put a little triangle on the center of the back. So as we go here, and I'm not going to do one for every single stripe. I'm going to do it every so often. A little triangle that comes down like so. And as we go, they don't have to be big, just little triangles. And as we go, they're going to flow all the way down here. And you bring them down the spine. And eventually, they're going to make it to the top of the tail here. Now, the thing about the tail is a 3-dimensional object, just like the neck we had up top. So we want to do the same kind of thing to make sure we know that it's a 3-dimensional object. And since the underbelly of this dragon has these kind of triangle scales, we want to continue that down the tail. So we want to continue it here, so we know the underbelly has those scales. And then we want to continue it here. And the way we continue that is we draw a line that's kind of parallel to this curve, say from the back of the hip. Now, what's going to happen is we're going to have this line meet this line here, because what we want is this idea that it's going to go behind. So it's going to come around here and then go behind the dragon tail there. And then as it curves this way, it's going to come back and be like so. So we're going to get this kind of inside-outside effect. And so since the way to make this easier to see is we're going to draw those scales. The triangles, those scale lines, we'll just put curved lines going like this, just to mimic the same shape we have here, but we're only seeing one side of it. So we'll come in. And then here, we're going to do the same. And you see how that creates that sense of a ribbon switching directions on us. It's curving and twisting away from us. And then we can put the scales going down and around here. And bring them up here. Now, we also have to continue these triangles, these stripes. So let's get those stripes on here. And you can see now it becomes important to get back to those triangles up there with black scales. So first, we're going to continue these triangles. Notice I'm curving the top of the triangle more than the bottom of the triangle. The reason I'm doing that is I'm trying to give the impression that these objects go around like this. We've got a tube here. And so I'm drawing around the tube with that upper line. In a way, I'm leading the eye so that it goes around the tube. And you can make them match. They get smaller as the area gets smaller. So you make them relate to how big the body is at that point. This is whereas these are pretty big, and the middle ones are. As we get to the tail, they should get smaller and smaller. And eventually what we're going to see is, because it twists here, what we're going to see is these stripes are going to start to do a change. And that change is that they're going to start to go around and over. So they become almost a shape like this. And then as we imagine that point is the center of the dragon's tail, we can bring them more like so. Let's go up here. Okay, now that should give us most of the impression we want for the tail. And we've got most of the dragon here, and I think a lot of the things that we can do next are, let's put some more scales. And I think let's make him look a little bit more ferocious. So part of the thing with the dragon being scary, so I wanted him to be scary and toothy, but I think his eyes look kind of kind. So I'm going to actually change his eyes. I didn't make them dark and scary enough. This is what's good about having an eraser and being able to rethink things as you go. So I'm going to bring this triangle, that is where his brow is, bring it in, and I'm going to bring it up like this. I'm going to do the same on that side. I'm going to bring this out. And this is really where the difference is, when you start getting a personality of the character in it. Because before he was this happy kind of, well, maybe not happy, but not a menacing dragon. And I want him to be a menacing, threatening dragon. So I'm going to make sure that a lot of the lines I use are harsh and sharp. And that his eye is going to be underneath this heavy, heavy, dark brow. And I'm going to make it small and mean. So basically a little half moon shape in there. And then we'll draw another one underneath it. But we won't finish it. We'll just draw part of that half moon. And then we can draw another part of that half moon there. And then in here, which is the inside of his socket, we're going to draw a nice dark shadow.
Looks
and you can
great.
see,
we have about 5 minutes left, but looks great.
Okay. So what I want to do is really, what I'm trying to do now is just kind of going through and making the dark things dark that I